My name's Claire Morgan, and from the outside, you'd probably think I had it all figured out. A nice home in Maple Creek, one of those sleepy Midwest towns where people wave from their porches and kids still sell lemonade in the summer. I was 59, married for over 30 years with a kitchen that always smelled like vanilla candles and lemon cleaner. Safe, predictable. Mark, my husband, had left early that morning for his annual week-long cabin trip in Wisconsin with his college buddies. He packed his fishing rods, his old camo duffel, and that weathered cooler he swore brought him luck. I helped zip up his bags, kissed his cheek at the door, and waved as he backed out of the driveway. I told myself the space would be good. We needed it. Lately, it felt like everything between us had turned pale, like one of those old photographs that's been left in the sun too long. We didn't argue, we didn't even talk much. Just coasting. That afternoon, I stood in my kitchen stirring a pot of marinara and sipping a chilled glass of Chardonnay. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears. Then the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened the door. And there he was, Ethan Cole. He stood on the porch with that crooked grin that used to belong to Mark back when we were both younger, and everything still had color. Ethan was my son's childhood best friend, now 28, tall, lean, with storm gray eyes that carried too much weight for someone his age. He used to come over barefoot, slamming screen doors and dripping popsicle juice on my hardwood floors. But that boy was long gone. The man standing in front of me was quiet, measured. "Hey, Claire," he said, rocking back on his heels. "I saw Mark yesterday. Said he'd be gone all week. I was in town, figured I'd stop by. Say hi." He hesitated. I saw the way his black t-shirt clung to him, how his jeans sat just right on his hips. I mentally scolded myself. "Oh," I said, stepping aside. "Of course. Come in, I was just making dinner." He smiled and walked in, and behind him came this scent: clean soap, a trace of cedar, and something warm. We sat at the kitchen island. I poured him a glass of wine. We talked. About his job downtown, his mom who had just moved to Arizona, how this house still smelled like cinnamon and dryer sheets. "You haven't changed a bit," he said, voice dipping lower. I laughed, brushing hair behind my ear. "Oh, I've changed. I've just gotten good at hiding it." There was a pause, long enough to feel. I turned back to stir the sauce, but I could feel his eyes, not casually glancing, watching. "You look beautiful, Claire." I stopped stirring. It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. Like a man. Certain. Present. I turned to him slowly. "That's sweet of you to say." He didn't flinch. "It's not sweet. It's true." And right then, something in the air shifted. That kind of thick stillness, like when a summer storm is coming and everything holds its breath. I stepped back. "You should stay for dinner," I said quickly. "I made way too much." He nodded, and the moment slipped back into normalcy, pots, boiling, plates, clinking. But inside me, something cracked open. Later, over pasta and laughter, he told me about his breakup. "Most girls my age don't really get me," he said, eyes resting softly on mine. "I guess I'm drawn to something real, grounded." Our eyes met. I felt it again, like he'd reached inside and lit up something long forgotten. After dinner, I cleared the table. He leaned against the counter, silent, watching me. I turned about to make a joke, something to break the tension, but he was closer than I thought. He reached up and brushed a strand of hair from my cheek. His hand lingered. "I thought about this," he said, voice barely above a whisper. I froze. My chest thundered. "Ethan," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. "This isn't right." "I know," he answered. "That's why I waited until he was gone." His honesty stunned me. No dancing around it, no games. "But he's your," I started. "He's your husband." "Not mine," Ethan said. and you don't look at him the way you just looked at me. That's when everything inside me shook, because he was right, and I hated how true it felt. We stood there suspended. I could have told him to leave, could have reminded him of every reason this was wrong, but I didn't, because in that one moment I felt wanted. Not out of duty, not from habit, but because he saw me. I stepped back, hands trembling. "I need to think," I whispered. He nodded. Didn't argue. Just held my gaze a second longer and left. I stood there alone, breathless, unsure, but more alive than I'd felt in years. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee I wasn't drinking. Outside, the world moved on like nothing had shifted. The neighbor's dog barked at the mail truck. A kid rode by on his bike, backpack swinging. Someone mowed a lawn a few houses down, but inside the house and inside me, everything felt different. Mark wouldn't be back until Monday. I had time to think, time to unravel whatever had been stirred awake inside me the night before. The sun streamed through the window, catching specks of dust in the air like tiny fireflies. I watched them float and fall, and it hit me how long it had been since I'd really seen this room. Not just passed through it, not just wiped counters and filled mugs and loaded the dishwasher, but seen it. The way the light curved over the edge of the sink. The cracks in the tile we always said we'd fix. The family photos on the fridge, Mark and I at our son's graduation, all smiling like nothing had changed. I stood up, suddenly restless. I couldn't sit still. I cleaned the already clean countertops, rearranged the silverware drawer, watered a plant that didn't need watering. And then my phone lit up. A message. From Ethan. "I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable. I just couldn't hold it in anymore. I won't push you, Claire." But I meant every word. I stared at it, breath tight in my throat. My fingers hovered over the screen for what felt like forever. And then I typed, "We need to talk. But not here." He replied less than a minute later. "Say when and where. I'll be there." I didn't think. I just answered 6 p.m. Roseview Park. The stone bench near the elm trees. It was the place where we used to take our son when he was little. A neutral space. Public. Open. Safe. I needed that. I couldn't trust myself behind closed doors right now. By the time the sun began its slow descent behind the trees, I was already waiting. And then I saw him. Ethan walked slowly across the grass, hands in the pockets of his forest green sweater. His eyes locked onto mine before he even reached me. And suddenly I felt exposed, like he could see the thoughts I hadn't said out loud yet. He sat beside me. Not too close. Not too far. For a long moment we just sat there, watching squirrels chase each other in the distance. Listening to the crunch of leaves beneath an old couple's shoes as they walked by, holding hands. "I don't understand what this is," I said finally, barely above a whisper. "You were like a second son to me. And now I'm not," he said. Not defensive, just honest. "I'm not a boy anymore. And you're not just someone's wife. Not to me." His words sank like stones into still water. "I've carried this for a long time," he went on. "Since I came back last year. I noticed you before you noticed me. The way your smile didn't reach your eyes. The way you looked like you were trying to remember how to feel alive again." My stomach tightened. "Ethan." If anyone knew, if Mark found out, he nodded. "I know. I'm not trying to ruin your life. I just couldn't lie to myself anymore. I'm here because I care, because I see you." My eyes burned, but I held the tears back. No one had said anything like that to me in years, maybe ever. "I don't know what I want," I said. My voice cracked on the last word. "That's okay," he said. "I'll wait." I turned toward him. "Wait for what?" "For you to believe it," he said softly. "To want it for yourself." I shook my head. This isn't just about me. He nodded again. I know. But don't pretend it didn't mean something. You felt it too. The silence between us thickened, but not in a bad way. It felt real. I stood slowly. So did he. Walk me to the car, I asked. He didn't touch me, didn't even brush my hand. But the space between us as we walked felt electric, charged with all the words we weren't ready to say yet. At my car, I turned to face him. I don't know what this is going to look like, I said. And I don't know if I'll regret this. But I know one thing: when I'm around you, I feel awake. I feel alive. And that terrifies me. He stepped in just a little, not too close. Then let it terrify you, he whispered. Just don't run from it. He didn't kiss me, but his fingers brushed mine. Light, careful, like a question without words. I drove home in the kind of silence that hums in your chest. I couldn't stop touching my lips. Even though he hadn't kissed me, it felt like he had. The house felt different when I walked back in that night. Not haunted, just still. Too still. I kicked off my shoes and stood there in the entryway, staring into the darkened living room like I didn't quite recognize it. Like I'd walked into someone else's life. There was a framed picture of Mark and me on the mantel. Cancun, 15 years ago. We were both tanned and windblown, grinning with plastic cups of sangria in our hands. We looked happy. Maybe we were. But somewhere along the way, that version of us had faded. I ran my fingers along the edge of the frame. It was dusty. I'd stopped noticing the dust. For the next 2 days, I tried to go back to normal. I folded laundry that didn't need folding, cleaned closets I hadn't opened in months, baked a peach cobbler I didn't eat. The whole time I kept thinking, forget it. Push it away. It was just a moment, just a glitch. But then night would come and the silence would settle in. I'd crawl into bed alone and the truth would come crawling back with it. I couldn't forget. Not the way Ethan looked at me. Not the way I looked back. On the third night, I broke. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone, willing myself not to type anything. But my fingers moved anyway. I need to see you. Just to talk. The reply came almost instantly. Come over. I'm home. That was it. No pressure, no begging, just open arms. I didn't think about it, I just moved. I got dressed in a fitted black blouse I hadn't worn in years, one that dipped low at the collar, pulled on dark jeans, brushed my hair, and put on a touch of lipstick like muscle memory kicking in from a time I'd long since buried. His apartment was on the 3rd floor of a quiet complex just outside town. Clean building, big windows, warm yellow lights glowing from inside. When I knocked, the door opened almost immediately. He was barefoot, gray t-shirt, sweatpants. Casual, but his eyes, they were wide, unmistakably glad. Claire, he said softly, I didn't know if you'd actually come. I shouldn't be here, I whispered, stepping inside, but I didn't know where else to go. You're always welcome here, he said, closing the door behind me. His place smelled like cedar wood and laundry detergent. Simple. Lived in. There was a candle flickering on the coffee table, a few books stacked beside it. Everything about it felt quiet, intentional, like him. We stood in the kitchen. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was full. I crossed my arms, not because I was cold, but because I didn't trust myself not to fall apart if I didn't. I keep asking myself what's wrong with me, I said, voice cracking. Why I didn't stop it. Why I'm still thinking about you. There's nothing wrong with you, Ethan replied gently. You feel something. That's not a flaw. It feels wrong. He stepped in slowly, carefully. Does it feel wrong because it is, or because it's unfamiliar? I didn't answer. He reached for my hand, held it lightly. You know I'd never hurt you. Right. I nodded. Tears threatened at the edges of my eyes. Then tell me to stop, he said, voice quiet. If you want me to stop, just say it. But I didn't, because I couldn't. In that moment, the truth swallowed every excuse, every fear, every voice in my head that told me to run. I wanted to feel something again, not out of habit, not out of memory, but out of now, out of choice. I stepped toward him, and he kissed me. Not fast, not desperate, just gentle, deliberate. A kiss that asked, a kiss that listened. His hand stayed at my waist, warm and steady, and when we pulled apart, my chest trembled with breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. You okay? He whispered, brushing a tear from my cheek with his thumb. I nodded, barely holding myself together. We sat on the couch side by side. His arm grazed mine. I started to speak, and then everything spilled out. How long I'd felt alone, how invisible I'd become, how I'd convinced myself that desire, intimacy, connection, those things belonged to younger people, to other women, not me. And he listened, really listened. Not once did he interrupt. Not once did he try to fix me. I want to know you, he said quietly when I finished. Not the version people see at book club, not the wife in the photos. You, the woman you don't show anyone. I looked at him, then shaken by how easily he saw through me. I don't even know who that is anymore, I whispered. Then let me help you find her. It wasn't a line, it was a promise. I didn't stay the night. After that kiss, after everything we said, I stood at his door, fingers clenched around the strap of my purse, breath still shaky. I should go, I whispered. Ethan didn't argue. He just looked at me, his hands still warm from where they had held mine. His voice was low and steady. You know where to find me? And that was it. No pressure, no drama, just space. And that strange, unbearable feeling of being seen. I drove home in silence. No music, just the soft hum of the tires on the road and the chaos in my chest. When I got back, the house greeted me the way it always did. Dim porch light, the click of the front door unlocking the faint scent of lemon polish from my afternoon cleaning spree. But it all felt off. Or maybe I was the one who'd shifted. I walked through each room, slowly touching things like I was walking through a museum of someone else's life. The throw blanket Mark and I used to share on the couch. The chipped mug he'd always used for coffee. The tiny scrape on the wall from when we moved in and swore we'd repaint. Everything had stayed. Only I had left quietly over time. I went to bed but didn't sleep. My body was still humming with something I didn't have words for. By morning, I still hadn't told anyone. Not my sister. Not my best friend from college. I wasn't ready to say anything out loud. Because saying it would mean admitting it happened. That something real was happening. Instead, I went about the day like I always did. Laundry. Grocery run. Reorganizing the spice drawer like it somehow mattered. But the lie of normalcy started to feel heavier with every passing hour. Like I was carrying a suitcase full of water. That night, I laid awake staring at the ceiling, asking questions I didn't know how to answer. Was I going to tell Mark? Was this something I had to confess if nothing technically happened? Was a kiss enough to count as betrayal? Or was the betrayal already in how deeply I'd stopped loving him? I didn't sleep. Again. The next morning, I looked at myself in the mirror, really looked. There was a woman staring back at me. Older, yes, but not gone. Eyes soft with doubt, lips still red from the night before, skin marked with age and life. And I realized I didn't feel shame. I felt confused, yes, torn, heavy with guilt, but not shame. Because what I'd felt in Ethan's arms wasn't sin. It was existence. I had felt something real, and that scared me more than anything. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to dip behind the trees, I found myself driving again. Not toward the store, not toward anyone I was supposed to see. Toward him. I didn't even know I'd made the choice until I was already parked outside Ethan's apartment. I didn't text first. Didn't call. Just climbed the stairs and knocked. When he opened the door, I saw the hesitation in his face followed by relief. "I didn't know if I'd see you again," he said. "I wasn't sure either," I replied, stepping in. We stood in the kitchen, both of us quieter than before. Not tense. Just aware. I turned to him. "I need to say something," I said, voice firmer than I expected. "And I want you to let me finish before you say anything." He nodded, eyes steady on mine. "I don't know what the future holds," I said. "I don't know if I'm brave enough to walk away from the life I've built. But what happened between us, what I felt, that wasn't a mistake. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't boredom. It was real. And it reminded me that I'm still a woman, that I still matter. You showed me that." Ethan stepped closer, carefully, like he didn't want to scare the moment. "You deserve more than to be remembered," he said quietly. "You deserve to be chosen." The words broke something loose in me. My throat tightened. My heart ached, not in pain but in recognition. "I don't want to hurt anyone," I whispered. "I know," he said, "and I'm not asking you to break anything. I'm just asking you not to forget what this feels like. What you feel like when you're with me." And then he pulled me into a hug. Not possessive, not hungry. Just warm. Safe. I closed my eyes and rested my head against his chest. The silence wrapped around us, not empty, but full. Of everything we didn't need to say. That night I went home again. Washed my face. Brushed my hair. And for the first time in years, I looked in the mirror and didn't see a ghost of who I used to be. I saw someone else. Someone returning. Someone I might actually want to know again. The next day, Mark came home. I heard the garage door rumble open before I even saw him. That familiar clatter of tires over concrete. The hum of the engine shutting off. And then footsteps. "Claire," he called out as the front door swung open. His voice was the same as it had always been, solid, warm, a little weathered around the edges. I used to find comfort in that voice. Now it made my stomach twist. He walked in sunburnt and smiling, dragging his suitcase across the hardwood. "Caught 4 bass," he said proudly, already unzipping the cooler. "One of them almost took my rod clean out of the boat." I smiled. I nodded. I asked about the weather, the cabin, if Tom still brought that horrible instant coffee like he did every year. We talked. Kind of. But it was the kind of conversation that floats on the surface. The kind you have when you both know the choreography so well you don't have to think about the steps. Later that night, we had dinner. Nothing fancy. Just grilled chicken and salad. Mark talked about how the guys had gotten older, how they used to fish from sunrise to sundown, and now everyone wanted to nap by 2. I laughed politely. He didn't notice that I barely touched my food. And when we cleared the table, he kissed my cheek and said he was going to catch up on the game in the den. Like always. I watched him disappear down the hall, remote in hand. And I stood in the kitchen alone, staring at the empty plates like they were artifacts of a life I no longer belonged in. That night, I lay in bed next to him. His breathing evened out quickly, deep and familiar. I turned toward the ceiling, the fan circling slowly overhead, casting soft shadows across the room. I couldn't pretend anymore. "Mark," I whispered. "Can we talk tomorrow? Really talk?" There was a pause. "Then sure," he mumbled. He rolled over his back to me, and I stared at the ceiling, heart pounding like a slow drumbeat in my chest. I didn't know what the talk would bring, if it would end something or begin something else. But I knew one thing: I couldn't keep living in a home that felt like a memory. 2 days passed. I waited. He didn't bring it up. It was like my words had drifted off into the night and dissolved. On the third day, I needed air. So I texted Ethan, "Meet me at the park," the usual bench. He didn't ask questions, just responded, "I'll be there." When I arrived, he was already sitting elbows on knees, eyes scanning the trees like he was searching for something invisible. I sat beside him. For a while, we didn't speak. "I talked to him," I said finally. He turned toward me but didn't say anything. "I don't have answers," I continued. "I still don't know where this is going. But I know I can't go back to pretending." He reached over slowly and laced his fingers through mine. "No rush," he said. "I'm here." And we sat there hand in hand, the breeze moving gently through the leaves above us. There were no plans made, no promises spoken, just a shared breath, a quiet pause, and the growing realization that I was no longer afraid of what came next. The next morning, Mark made coffee. I came down to the kitchen and found him standing at the counter humming a tune I didn't recognize. The smell of dark roast filled the room like it always did. For a moment, it almost felt like nothing had changed. He poured me a cup, slid it across the counter, and smiled. "Didn't forget how you like it," he said. I smiled back, automatic. "Thanks." We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. The silence between us was long, not tense, just full. And then he said it. "You wanted to talk." I nodded slowly. My fingers wrapped tight around the warm mug, grounding myself. "I did," I said. "Still do." He leaned back in his chair. His eyes, blue and tired, searched mine. "Is this about us?" I hesitated. "It's about me. But yes, it's about us too." He didn't interrupt. He waited the way you do when you already know something's coming and you're just bracing for the shape of it. "I've been feeling like I've been disappearing," I said. "Like I'm fading into the background of my own life, and I've spent so much time being a wife, a mom, a friend that I don't even remember how to be me anymore." He looked down. Quiet. Processing. "I didn't mean for it to happen," I added. "It wasn't anyone's fault. Not really. We just stopped seeing each other." He rubbed his jaw, then looked up. "I didn't know you felt that way." "That's the problem," I said gently. "You didn't notice. And maybe I didn't say it out loud. Maybe I should have. But I kept waiting for you to look at me the way you used to. And somewhere along the way I stopped expecting it." He was quiet for a long time. Then he sighed. "I thought we were doing okay. I mean, we don't fight. We've got a good life." I nodded. "We do. We built a good life. But there's more to living than paying the bills and sharing a Netflix password." He almost smiled at that, but it faded before it reached his eyes. "So what are you saying?" I looked at him. Really looked. The man I'd built a life with, raised a son with, buried parents with, celebrated anniversaries and survived job layoffs and waited in emergency rooms with. I'm saying I need to figure out who I am now, not who I was when we were 25. Not just your wife or his mother. Me. Mark swallowed. He looked older than I'd seen him in years. "Is there someone else?" he asked quietly. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "There's someone who made me realize I'm still here, that I still matter. But this isn't about him. It's about me waking up." He nodded once, slowly, like he was trying not to let it hit all at once. "I don't want to lose you," he said. "I don't want to lie to you," I replied. And that was the end of it. For now. He didn't yell. He didn't ask questions. He just stood, cleared the table, and said he had to run an errand. I listened to the front door close. The silence that followed was deafening. Later that day, I went to the park again. Same bench. Same tall trees. Ethan was already there. He stood when he saw me but didn't move closer. He was waiting, always waiting for permission. I sat down beside him. I talked to him, I said. He didn't say anything right away. He just looked at me carefully, gently, and he asked. I didn't burn it all down, I said. But I lit a match, just to see if it still sparked. He smiled at that, a sad, understanding smile. I'm proud of you, he said. I looked at him then, not the way I used to, with guilt, with fear, but with something steadier, clearer. I don't know where this leads, I told him. I don't know if I'm brave enough to walk away yet. But I know I'm not going to keep walking blind. He reached out, took my hand. Warm. Familiar now. No map, he said. But we walked together. And for the first time, I believed that maybe I didn't need to have all the answers. I just needed to stop pretending I wasn't allowed to ask the questions. The following week unfolded slowly. Mark stayed out later than usual. Yard work errands, a few extra shifts at the golf course where he volunteered. We still talked, but only about groceries, whether the dog food brand we'd been meaning to switch. We didn't talk about us. Not yet. Maybe he wasn't ready. Maybe I wasn't either. Some days I felt steady. Other days I felt like a wire stretched too tight. But in all of it, I kept asking the one question I'd been too afraid to ask for years. What do I want? Not what's right. Not what's expected. Just, what do I want? One crisp morning, I sat in the sunroom again, mug of coffee in hand. Same spot. Same view. But I was different. The world looked ordinary, soft rays of sunlight slanting across the hardwood floor, leaves rustling outside, but everything inside me had shifted. The silence didn't scare me anymore. It felt like mine. I reached for my phone. Not to text Ethan, not to check in, just to write. Words poured out like warm water. Not a confession, not an apology, just truth. Thank you. For seeing me, for waking me up. No matter where this leads, I'll never forget that. I didn't send it. I just saved it. Because sometimes what you write for someone else is really meant for yourself. That evening, I drove again. But not to Ethan's apartment, not to the park. I drove out past the edge of town to a small lake with a wooden dock, the one Mark and I used to visit in our early years. Back when we were too broke for vacations and too in love to care. I sat on the hood of my car, feet pulled up beneath me, wrapped in an old cardigan, and I remembered the version of me that used to laugh here. Not as someone's wife, not as someone's mother. Just Claire. Just a woman who wanted to feel alive. The wind stirred my hair. The water shimmered gold under the fading light. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something or someone to tell me what to do next. I already knew. The next day, I met Ethan again. Same bench. Roseview Park. He stood when he saw me. Hope flickered in his eyes. I sat down beside him and he followed. I need to tell you something, I said, and it might not be what you're hoping to hear. He didn't flinch. He just nodded. I'm not ready to make big decisions. Not yet. But I'm also not going back to sleepwalking through my life. He looked at me gently. That's not a no, he said. No, I replied. It's an honest answer. He reached for my hand. No pressure, no pull. Just presence. You don't owe me anything, he said. I smiled softly. I know. That's what makes you different. We sat there a while, no timeline, no destination, just two people in the middle of something honest. And when I stood to leave, he didn't ask when I'd see him again. He didn't need to. We both knew this wasn't about endings or beginnings. It was about becoming. As I walked away, I felt the sun on my skin. The air smelled like earth and leaves and the first breath after a long-held silence. And I knew whatever came next, I wasn't going to lose myself again.